Okay. Yes, we're live. Wonderful. Let me just triple check this. Let me have a look. Let's just make sure I can see us. Yes, we're here. Wonderful. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to this Allowing Life to Be Sweet interview with Lee Brook-Tyler. Lee Brook-Tyler. In my mind, it's always been Taylor until I actually read it properly.
I won't hate you.
Yeah, so what we're going to be doing today is just really, I'm going to interview Leanne and about what it is that she does, and because she's been showing up consistently in a way that I've been really drawn to on Facebook, like through her posts. And she's had a circle recently called Waking the Wild Feminine, and she had something else about unraveling the body. And so all of the things she's been talking about have been really alluring to me, and I'm like, as most people know, I'm quite witchy and magic myself. So what I'd really love for you to do, if you are here, is really allow yourself to just be here. Like if you're watching it on the replay, allow yourself to find the space, because this is ultimately what we're going to be talking about, is stepping away from busyness, stepping away from conditioning, stepping away from all the things that we've been conditioned to do, and really trusting that everything's going to be okay if we give ourselves some space. So and I am going to be talking to Leanne all about how she does that, and also, like, what does it really take to start living a life like that, and actually know that you can earn the money you want, and you can be of service, and that you can be a good partner, a good mother, and all the things that we desire to be. So hi Leanne, do you want to just come in and speak quickly before I lead us into a little grounding thing?
Sure. Love that introduction. Thank you so much, Lucy. Yeah, it's been really interesting with even though these are themes that are constantly on my mind, part of my life, part of my work, it's been really interesting knowing that we're going to have this conversation and how much more that's brought into the light for me. Like, oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't seen that distinction before. I hadn't seen that has this way of showing up in different women's lives. So just
Wow.
is interesting, isn't it, how kind of a door opens and then you see more about something you already thought you'd seen so much on. So this has been a real gift, and I can't wait to get into this with you.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, wonderful. Well, if you're here, if we've got a comment already, let me just go on to it. It's going to make a noise. All right, we've got Nikki. Hi, Nikki. Morning, my love. Morning, Trisha. Okay, so I'm just gonna get everyone, so if you can just close your eyes. Okay, so everyone just close your eyes, and I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and then out through your mouth, and just let go any tension that you have today. So in through the nose and out through the mouth. And on the exhale, just imagine you're releasing all of the thoughts, all of the stress, all of the tension. So in through your nose and out through your mouth. And so you can keep breathing how you like, but keep your eyes shut just for now, and just allow yourself to drop into the place before your thoughts, and just drop out of who you think you are, what you think you need to do, all the things that you've been told about how to live your life, and how you need to live the next 10 minutes, and what you need to do today, and what you need to be to get successful. Because what I'm seeing more and more is, the more I allow this space, the more things show up as if by magic. And I think most women, we want magic. We want magic in our lives. And so we're drawn to conversations like this because it's actually more of our natural state to live like more from a place of being rather than doing. And so if you let yourself in the next 45 minutes listen without planning, listen without thinking how you need to implement and all of that stuff, and if you get thoughts like, well, that's a nice idea, but just let them go and allow what you hear here to recode your mind in whatever way you need it to. And so just take one last deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Okay. Okay, so if you have any questions throughout today's interview for Leanne, for me, then you can comment underneath, and we'll create some space to talk through it. So just comment as you like. We'll be checking the comments as we go. Okay, so again, thank you for being here, Leanne. Now, I just love to know, what's your story when it comes to stepping into and allowing yourself to be, you know, integrated with the magic and, you know, allowing that kind of beautiful aspect of your psyche to come through you and you to embody that and to speak about that and all of that kind of thing.
Oh, I love the way you language that, Lucy. I'm going to do perhaps well, my intention is we'll see what actually comes out of my mouth. My intention is to give you a kind of a brief snapshot and then allow you to see where you want to be drawn, because I was just pondering, it's a story of maybe 4 parts, and I can breeze through at least the first 2 parts, and then it's the second 2 parts that I think are going to be most interesting to us to explore, and I think potentially to viewers. So the first part's, I guess, common to all of us, that we came into this world, and as children, depending on how we were raised and the environment we were raised in, most of us at least would have had a taste of some of the elements we're going to be talking about in here, which is that kind of living life from that flow with a sense of we can just be, and life is there to kind of hold us and play with us. And I think we've all had that experience, you know, sadly not all of us for as long as we should have, particularly in today's culture. You know, many of us, that would have been much shorter than I would love for children to have. But certainly I think most of us have at least had a taste of some of those qualities.
Sure.
So that was certainly true for me. And I actually was very fortunate that, because of my upbringing was a very kind of hippie upbringing, I had that experience for probably much longer than most. Like, I really was a real wild child, in the kind of, not the drinking, drugs, rock and roll sense, but in, like, you know, being in nature, being able to be free.
Lovely.
I then and again, this phase is going to be really familiar to most people watching this, and particularly women. We learn there is a way to be. And that, through the lens I talk about it, is a very masculine way to be. Our culture is built in very linear, productivity driven lines that we suddenly realize, like, oh my goodness, oh, I see. In order to be successful, to fit in, to be safe, it looks like this. I have to become this. And I very much did the same thing, took that route, slotted into the way of being that looked like it made sense for me to be safe and secure and successful, and all of those things. So that's the kind of first two parts of my story. The third part is I lost my father. So I was brought up by a single father. So we were very, very close. And then I lost my father 8 years ago. And that for me was a kind of profound shift in how I experienced life, how I experienced myself, what I saw was possible.
Yeah.
So that very much took me. It was interesting listening to the beautiful guided visualization you took us through, where I was thinking, as you were talking about that space for before thoughts, that was really my introduction to that space as an adult, where it's like, this is possible. It's possible to be living from this freedom of kind of thought created, ways of fitting in. I can just be. And so for probably, it's hard to put absolute timescales on this because, as often life happens, there's often like a sort of subtle blending where you suddenly realize, oh, I've become this. When did that happen? But for however many years, that's very much where I lived life from. There was a lot of flow, allowing life to happen.
Yeah.
And then the last kind of, when I say last, there may be like new chapters to come, but the chapter I'm very much in now is one where I've realized that there is that space before thoughts that we're talking about. And then for me, certainly, and I see this show up over and over again with the women, particularly that I work with, there were still patterns of thinking, beliefs that were held in shadow, held in my unconscious, that was still keeping me trapped. It was out of my awareness. I thought I was like, here I am. I'm free of all this now that I've seen through the illusion of thought.
Yeah.
And actually, I was still just as trapped. It was just out of my awareness.
Okay.
So there was a very marked, like when I say I was still just as trapped, I wasn't just as trapped as I was in the kind of like in the second stage where I was really fixed in this masculine world, but comparatively, compared to where I am now, I can see there were still real patterns of being that I was in that I wasn't aware of. So I'm really happy to explore both, but I really want to make there was a real distinction, some of which I'm only really starting to see in hindsight between those two phases. And there's kind of, I think that last phase that I'm in now, that requires a degree of kind of risk and a degree of depth and a degree of cost that we almost need to choose into to get the sweetness that we're ultimately talking about here. So I'm kind of like coming here with like a good fairy, bad fairy vibe.
Oh, it's exciting. I knew it was the right time to have you on. It's so exciting. I could just talk about it all day. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Kate. Hi, Tally. Tally, right?
Tally.
Right. Okay, lovely. So what I want to know, so for me, the last two phases seem like how it matches my reality. What you just said is like that first stage, is that where you understand about 3P and the kind of awareness of like how it works, how life works, right? Okay. But then you understood that ultimately the way I see that is like, okay, so if that's true, then why am I not just going, okay, like inching through my life little like by little, but actually if I want to get to there, why am I not just going straight there if all I understand is true, right? So like if I understand about consciousness and pure awareness and like I am that, but then why am I not living like that straight away? Like why is that not then completely changing my reality because I decided to? right? Is that what you kind of mean? Because that's what I heard.
I think that is I think that's a facet of it for sure. Yeah, very
Right.
much so. And
Okay.
that actually mirrors. I did a live to my group yesterday talking about what I've seen about the ascent, which you could really map what I'm calling the ascent over that stage 3, and the descent, which you could map over to stage 4. As in those kind of like, it's really weird now we've ended up these stages, but hopefully everyone's following this.
It's fine.
And I was talking about this through the lens of most people I work with come from some form of spiritual path, or rather often the 3 Ps, but some form of non-duality where they've experienced themselves before thought, they've experienced their non-separation. And then often they'll come to me to work with me in some medium or other from that place, and often what will drive them are the kinds of questions you're asking. Like, if I can experience myself as this like infinite consciousness, infinite possibilities, why the hell am I not able to create an amazing relationship? Or why am I not able to live in this way that feels like I'm living my soul purpose? Or why do I seem to have this constant ongoing struggle with money? Often there'll be those kind of realities don't seem to be changing despite this profound, and again, I'm not in any way diminishing, like a really profound shift into this beautiful space of peace, freedom, love. And so those questions that you're saying are exactly the kinds of things that I hear. So yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm so glad we're on a level, because I've had similar I just think exactly, I feel like I totally get where you're at with that, and I totally feel like I've had the same wanderings about that myself. So okay, so then when you say like so when you talk about being in the feminine and allowing your life to be sweet, like what does that mean to you? Like what does that mean it was possible for us?
I'm feeling drawn, first of all, if it's okay with you, before I answer that, just to give a little bit of a kind of framework from which we can talk. So we've got a common understanding, because we think that we've got a common understanding of words like the feminine. And I really appreciate your question to ask me to distill that further, but it feels to me I can't do that without also then talking to what I mean by the masculine, because by not doing that, I'm almost demonizing as like that being wrong and the feminine being right, which is absolutely not where I'm coming from. So if that's okay with you, if I just kind of lay out my sense of both. So that we have some context for the feminine. So my sense of this, which is ongoing actually, it's one of those things again where every time I think I've kind of landed on some solid ground, like this now is what I mean when I talk about masculine, feminine, I kind of then go woof, and like, oh right, what's up there, here I am, this all looks new again. So this right now is where I'm talking from, but who knows where it'll be in 6 months time. So when I talk about masculine, feminine, I'm talking about archetypal energetic patterns. I'm not talking about men and women. I'm talking about patterns of energy that show up. They're ancient patterns of energy. We've seen them show up in all sorts of ways across time, across probably the universe, let's just say for the moment the world, because that's the place we can most see it. And no one owns them. No one can kind of like say, oh, this is me. These are beyond us. They're universal, divine, archetypal patterns of energy. And then as humans, we have, again, this gorgeous ability, because we are infinite, because we have possibilities that often are way beyond what we can conceive of, we can embody and express all kinds of archetypal energies, including masculine, feminine. And as I said earlier, from what I understand, our culture, our modern culture very much has been built on masculine lines. And again, that's not with a sense of like masculine is wrong, but an imbalance of anything creates results that we may not want. And that's very much what I've seen, that we've created a way of being that's heavily, heavily masculine, heavily linear, as in we'll do that, then this will happen, then this will happen. And it just keeps going in one way. It's very much measured in senses of kind of like, how much have we made? How much have we created? And from there, so much of our focus is placed on valuing the masculine, living the masculine. We can't help but diminish and therefore actually demonize the feminine, both in terms of that, how that shows up in a woman's body, how that shows up in everyone's bodies, how that shows up in the earth. I mean, look at how we treat planet Earth, which is a manifestation of the feminine. And so, and a lot of this is happening outside of our conscious awareness. It's not something we're typically talking about that through that lens. So much of what we're choosing is from shadow, is on our blind spot. We're all just kind of, this is how to be, you know, just as I was talking about in my kind of that second chapter, this is how things are done here. Okay, I'll be that. And so that requires, first of all, having the opportunity to see this and then choose into this. You choose into seeing more. And so going back to your question, if we see this again as not being right or wrong or one being better than the other, but just again, archetypal energies and what they represent, from that lens of, if I'm embodying a lot of masculine, which I did, I was brought up by a single father. As much he was a hippie, still, there wasn't very much he understood about what it meant to embody and express the feminine as a woman. So, you know, I had perfect, and he would also have called himself a feminist. And as much as I'm not going to say anything that in any way diminishes in the value of feminism, it was much needed, is much needed. It also has a lot of masculinity kind of almost like built into it. In itself, it comes from quite a masculine place. So from there, we are valuing things and embodying and expressing things like, as I said, linear, productivity, intellect, logic, fixedness, direct. If we then look at the feminine, we're talking about things like cycles, fluidity, softness, pleasure, beauty. And of course, both of those are needed. Both of them are needed.
Absolutely,
And it's a choice. That I'm not in any way saying that anyone or any woman should be choosing to embody and express more of the feminine. That's a choice that I've made, and it's a choice that many of the women that come work with me choose. But it is absolutely a sovereign choice. I'm not ever going to say this is what everyone should do. I see there's real value in doing so, but that's what I'm talking about. So going back to your question, for me, that's what my life has more of. It has more fluidity, more beauty, more pleasure, more love, more openness, more surrender, more, and this is kind of like almost like a dirty word, more submission, more receiving. So that's a very long answer to, like, that is not the entirety of my life, but a lot of what my day-to-day experience in my life feels like now.
And have you found that the results from that place have been just as good as what you'd expect if you just plowed on through with your masculine energy?
It's funny, isn't it? Because even like the word results is very masculine, and we're then going to be measuring results through a masculine lens. I mean, I can answer your question for sure, but I just really want to, again, every time we're using this languaging of our masculine culture, I want to illuminate it, because otherwise how can we see it for what it is? So the short answer is, if you were to use that masculine lens of results of how I live now, I would say my results are far in excess of how I was living previously. You could measure that in all kinds of ways. I mean, income's probably one of the ones that we're most likely to look at. Absolutely, yes. Financially, much more successful. When we look at other measures, I don't know, other measures we might want to look, kind of how hard I work, what my results are, my impact on the world. I don't think there's any measures that you wouldn't look at and think, are they equally as good results. I think on every measure I can think of, they probably all equally as good, if probably most are better.
Yeah, and but the reason I think it's important to measure it like that, because if we are balancing both, we desire to be able to settle back into our more natural flow, which is how the feminine, like this flowy, the fluid state, the more space, the more time to do things that you enjoy, allowing yourself to have more pleasure. We want to know that we can have the other things, like, right? So it's like, we want to know that by doing that, we're not sacrificing. And so we're not sacrificing what we'd have if we were to continue in the conditioned way. Like,
yes,
more hours equals more money, more this equals more that, etc.
Yes. However, I love that you've brought the word sacrifice up here, because my sense of it is it absolutely does require sacrifice, but not maybe in the way that, again, we would have measured it prior. And so this is the bad fairy parts. You tell me how much the bad news you want.
No, I'm just, look, it's all welcome. So it's just going to come up. It's fine. Just, I'm totally open. So tell me what you mean by that then.
So again, if we look at this through the lens of some of the qualities the feminine brings, and that is being deeply in touch with our desire, what's for us. And that requires in itself some degree of sacrifice. That's going to come at a cost for us to be able to be in full relationship with our heart's desire, to even be able to stop noticing what's being called of us out there, and to be able to go inwards requires quite a degree of shift before we've even got to the point of, am I going to empower this in the world? But to even say, you know what, this isn't about what you say I'm here for. I'm going inwards to listen to what's actually for me. And what I see come up over and over again when I'm working with women like this is this will drive up all of that fear of those kind of good girl patterns, the people pleasing patterns of, and this is like when we're talking about desire in groups like Wake and Wild Feminine, one of the things I hear over and over again, to the point where it kind of delights me when it comes up, because we're like, there it is what if my desires aren't reasonable? And I love that, because it's like, they're not going to be. They're not going to be reasonable. How would you measure them anyway? But again, that just shows you, doesn't it? Like, again, through our training of being good girls, even when we're talking about our heart's desire, we're doing it from that lens of, oh, but is it reasonable? Throw that ruler of measuring desire via reasonability, throw that out. That is not the right metric here. So it requires a lot, like even before we've done anything, before we've even like empowered that desire, it requires something of us to even dare to look inwards and see what's for me. And that's often going to bring up quite a lot of, again, fear, but also grief. Like when we start to really tap into who we are, what we've come here to be, and then we see how far off from that we are, like often it comes with real grief, like, oh, I can so see that I love talking about this through the lens of the archetype, the lover, and the shadow of the prostitute. So for most women in our culture, we've been really trained to live as the prostitute. And what we mean by that is to constantly make deals and bargain our value and our values. So we'll be, oh, if I do this, if I behave like this, I'll get this reward. And sometimes that reward will be literally money, but often it will be safety, security, feeling liked, feeling loved, things that are very valuable. But we are literally selling ourselves, selling our soul, selling our value in order to receive those. So what we're talking about here is a shift from showing up as the prostitute to showing up as the lover, who is all about, what do I love? What's for me? What do I deeply value? And what am I prepared to sacrifice to be this?
Right. Okay.
So that when I say sacrifice, like that is absolutely part of it. It doesn't mean we're going to necessarily have to sacrifice. Going back to your original question, like I totally get, you know, that's going to be fear. Like, so I can have all this like floating around in a white dress, you know, through the roses, but I won't earn any money. It's probably not going to be that kind of sacrifice, but honestly, it's probably going to be a much deeper, scarier sacrifice we will need to make.
So what have you, so now I'm going to just tell us how that's shown up for you.
Wow. So
if you
many
don't
ways.
mind. Yeah.
Sure. And I could give tons and tons of examples. And what I will also say is I've seen that this isn't a kind of one-time deal. Like I wish it was. We could say, okay, I'm willing to make this sacrifice and then I'm going to get this and then it's game over. What I keep seeing is like, whew, it's one after another. It's one, and I referenced this in my post this morning. Each time we're expanding into a new way of being, a truer way of being, a deeper way of being, that's another time that we're risking, another time we're stepping into the unknown, another time we're sacrificing.
Yeah.
And so this is a kind of like ongoing cycle of life, death, rebirth. So I could give you lots and lots of examples of where I stepped into this. One that's just come to mind that I was sharing with
I'm glad they do that themselves
out. I'm just going to nip and shut that door just so
that's all right. Yeah,
I think
go
my
ahead.
husband's playing cards with my daughter. It's their coronavirus little routine
Ritual. Lovely.
Comes
Yeah.
his lunch and plays cards with our daughter.
Oh, that's nice.
Can you keep an eye on the dogs, please? So one that came to mind as I was talking to a client this week was around money. So it's really relevant to what we're talking about here, and how, and a lot of what I'm about to say here, oh my goodness, right, we're going to ignore the dogs and hope my husband's
all right, don't worry about it. We can have a bit of disruption, that's fine.
What I'm going to say, some of what I'm going to say is absolutely going to be a bit edgy, a bit triggering, a bit kind of seeming like I'm talking about women regressing, and there's probably only so much kind of caveating and damage control I can do in this setting. Okay, it doesn't look like the message got through to my husband to look after the dogs. Give me a sec.
Bless you. No worries at all. So guys, if you've got any questions or you've got any comments on what Lee's saying, then please do involve yourself. We love to read the comments. We love to see what you're picking up on. So let us know. Yeah.
Excellent. Sorry. Okay. Looks like the dogs are now back in here.
Don't worry about it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's only so much time I can really do justice to like putting this out. All I can say is I say everything I'm about to say from the lens of I was probably the kind of feminist poster girl. And again, everything I'm saying is no way diminishing the very real need for feminism, the very real need for equality. And if we look at this through the lens of David Dader's work, who I love, actually, this might be a really quick way of talking to what I'm speaking about. If we look at kind of 1950s dynamic housewife, man goes out, breadwinner, that's what David Dader describes as stage one. Then through feminism and equality, we've moved into a stage two dynamic. What I see is very available next is what David Dader would call stage three, which is leaning into this polarity where we can choose to embody and express both ends of that pole, masculine, feminine pole. And again, sovereign choice. This isn't for everyone. This is not saying we should do this. This is what's available to us if we choose to move into that stage three. So that's where I'm speaking from. And this, for me, was one of the ways this has really shown up as like a, whoo, this is an unknown. This is a sacrifice. This is really requiring of me, like absolute surrender, was a moment, and this was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, where I made a kind of, some of it was a verbal agreement with my husband, but it was much more an internal shift where I had this sense of, I'm not even going to measure my own worth, my productivity, anything, my being, through the lens of me needing to earn money. I'm just going to surrender to the fact that actually my husband's got it covered. And this for me was like, I cannot even tell you what a act of like, whew, this was. I had all the way through. When I left the corporate world, we were kind of met and we were equals really in terms of salary. And then when I left the corporate world, I took quite a big payout. So I'd always paid my way. Even when I had my children, I worked part-time. I was still earning a fairly good salary. I always had this sense of like quality. I can be independent. I'll always be able to pay my way. So this was a real shift to actually, in financial terms, my husband can cover it. This is really like for me to be okay with. Whew. And that brought up, it sounds an easy thing. It sounds like, well, how lovely. You know, you were lucky your husband could pay that. That was like what that really required in terms of shift of identity for me was a huge step into the unknown, a huge cost. And that's what I chose, to be okay and to be in surrender to the fact that that was not any longer a way that I was going to measure my being, my worth, my life, or anything. As it happened, from that space, my earnings through my business went up.
So, well, I've had similar experiences. So
the irony was in me like, okay, here I am. I'm just here now to receive. That's what happened. But then, which makes that sound like, oh, here was the lovely part. But what that really cost me in terms of like, oh my goodness, do I still have value? If I'm not any longer going to measure myself in terms of like, okay, more, better, how do I measure my worth? How do I measure my contribution to the household?
Yeah.
So that's an example of what I mean by sacrifice. And again, it may not come in the way that we think.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the idea of risk. Likely there'll be a cost. And the risk is we don't know what the cost will be. There'll be an unknown element to it.
Yeah. I just want to say I've had a similar experience of that with allowing that part. So I won't go into for too long, so I want to move on to it. But I had, like, it didn't matter how much my partner had said that, like, it's us now, it's not you with your money and then me over here, like we've got a child, and you know, and I was just like, yeah, but still, like, you know, like I couldn't fully take that. And even though it was said, I would almost create the illusion that he thought that I should be doing more. Totally. And I would like pick on it, like that's what you meant. And he would be like, I didn't do anything or say anything, and I'd be like, I saw it. Right. So yeah, I just want to so really understand that. Now, so okay, I just want to make sure we get the right questions in here. So allowing life to be sweet. So how can someone who really wants to and is called by this, like is pulled into experiencing and allowing that space and kind of knows it, but then still keeps going back down the other route, the easier route, which is, it is easier. It's easier to carry on as you usually do. It's really hard to choose to honor your soul over doing some more work, or you know, just making sure you get that thing done for that client, or whatever, the, you know, doing more and planning and you know, that kind of thing. So how does someone start to allow that to be the case and allow that energy to kind of show them what to do?
I love some of the words you used in that question, because I think that was one of those beautiful examples of like the clues in the question, where this isn't for everyone, and it isn't for everyone at every point in their life. And so going back to what you said there, you know, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, oh, that feels like something I'm called towards, that first and foremost is what we're talking about here. That's whether you use the word soul, your heart, that is something in you saying, this does feel a bit unknown and a bit scary and a bit awkward and a bit difficult, and I don't know how, but I'm feeling a pull to it. That's ultimately the place we're constantly talking to when we're talking about our heart's desire and like living from soul. Is that way we'll know. So I really wanted to kind of honor that first and foremost. I love that you languaged that.
Yeah.
And then again, coming back to the word soul, there was a point where I had a sense like this is going to require a real sovereign choice and commitment. This isn't going to happen. You know, the world is going to be constantly telling me to live otherwise. The world isn't going to be telling me to live from soul. It's actually going to be telling me the opposite and going to make it quite difficult to live from soul. So this is going to require at least an equal amount of energy coming the other way in order to kind of like counteract that. So for me, that was this real sense of I'm committing to living from soul. I'm committing to living a soul-led life. And that was actually something I sort of spoke out as a declaration to myself. It was an agreement I made with my coach. And that ultimately is how I'm living my life. And it's simple and it's clear and it kind of doesn't really allow much wriggle room because I will know. And that was the single most like powerful and most scary choice I probably ever made.
Wow. Yeah.
So it sometimes can take, as I take women through various journeys, like one way or another, I'll be inviting them to make commitments of that kind. It might not be quite that languaging. And I'll really also invite them to notice, like, is that something you can do? Or is there some work to do before you're at that point?
At that point, yeah. I got that,
but
yeah.
Ultimately, that's, you know, anything that we keep tuning back to, like what's for me, what am I being called towards, what can I say right now? I'm going to say this is the choice I'm making. And it might be a much like the one I've just given is probably one of the biggest choices you could possibly make. So I'm not saying like go all the way there, but it could be something smaller, like even I'm going to choose to really honor this call that I'm feeling towards the feminine or towards a sweeter life. I'm making that choice. And then from there, we're open to hearing, well, like, what's that next breadcrumb? I'm really big believer in like, these don't have to be like big grand life changes all at once. Often they come in like really small little breadcrumbs, like an introduction to a new person or hearing about a book or a course, or it could be anything, absolutely anything. But once we're from that place of making the choice, like we're open to see it. And it will come, you know, in all sorts of different ways. Again, that's what honors our uniqueness. Like honor your unique soul is going to have a unique path, a unique next breadcrumb, unique next breadcrumb.
Yeah. Gorgeous. Okay. And so because I want to make sure we talk about what you're doing right now, what have you got on offer that allows women to, is it just women?
It's not. Most of I talk about women mostly, partly because my journey has so followed the heroine's journey, and that's been probably my biggest shift, I suppose. I guess as often we notice, like in our own medicine and our own expansion lies our medicine. So I notice like that is where I'm called towards most. Because Jonathan and I work together, we do also we're about to run our first course, co-led course in years that I'll talk to you about in a moment. So we run things together like that. And we also, if we're working one-to-one with a client, we have a package called Waking the Wild Sovereign, where if it's a man, he'll have, say, for example, 3 sessions with Jonathan and then 1 with me. And if it's a woman, vice versa. So I do work with men too, but primarily women. So what's up next is, as I just said, we're about to launch Waking the Wild Heart. And it is the first course, program, whatever, that Jonathan and I have co-led in about 4 years, maybe even longer. It's quite some time since we've done something like this together. So it's really exciting. And it's all about giving, and it's going to be for couples and individuals both. And I think there's going to be a nice mixture, really allowing them to come to that place we're talking about where they're able to feel their heart desire, to open their hearts, and to live as what you could call divine love. In that also, we're going to be looking at kind of what creates polarity. So what creates that kind of real spark of sexual juiciness?
Yeah.
What creates some of the kind of more, they're not so sexy to like, you know, like relationship dynamics, what's going to be helpful to know. So it's going to be really practical elements of it, as well as that kind of real energetically speaking, like what allows us to come together as two people and create beautiful intimacy. So that's starting. We haven't actually officially opened the doors yet, but we have quite a big interest list. So if you're hearing this and you're thinking that's for me, go register interest at primalhappiness.co/WTWH, short for Waking the Wild Heart.
We'll pop it. We'll give it. I'll make sure you give me the link. Yeah.
And we start that in September. So that's the next thing we've got coming up. I can share more with you, but that's like kind of our like hot off the press, what's coming next.
Yeah. Great. Gorgeous. Okay. And the Waking the Wild Feminine, is that still happening?
Yes, I think I'm going to go to a much deeper journey with that once a year. And so the intention now is to start the next one in November.
Yeah.
My sense of it is it's going to probably be a 3-month exploration. And it'll still be really based around the idea of a circle, because I think the power of a women's circle, same for a man's circle, I'm going to talk specifically about women's circle right now. What's created within that dynamic is medicine all of its own that I can't replicate, you know, like that is medicine. And I see the power in that so beautifully that is always going to be the kind of heart of Waking the Wild Feminine. What I'm going to bring into forthcoming Waking the Wild Feminines is more opportunity for group coaching, because that's always like something I've had to kind of fit in, and also more teaching. So that's going to be much more intentional this time. Whereas before it's mostly focused around the circle, I'm going to bring in something that's going to be much more of an intentional journey of everything I can see that allows women to come back into that space that we're talking about, of their wildness and of the feminine, and to be able to live from soul, live from that like deeply receptive space, but not a passenger to life. Again, when we're able to like empower our heart's desire, that's anything but passive. So that's happening in November. And to register your interest for that is also limited space. It's always a maximum of 8 women, and that's at primalhappiness.co/WTWF. You can probably notice a pattern here with our page names.
Okay, lovely. Well, that's brilliant. I just want to, so loving this conversation. Thank you both. That's from Kate. You're welcome, Kate. Thank you for showing up. And I'm going to put these links in the comments, or the thing above. I don't know which one. And thank you, Leanne. We have to end now, so I've got to go and pick up my son. But thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was really impactful. I think what you just said, even in that short space, I think it was really impactful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, lovely. Thanks everyone for watching. See you soon. Bye. Bye.